that where there are there is suffering, and there is the pain of birth, getting older, getting sick, existential worries, financial worries, many other things, and then of course the existential concern of death itself. But I wanted to talk about how to actually how to heal our problems in a way that maybe is not commonly thought about or spoke of, because it seems, I think all of you will agree with me, that no matter how hard we try, uh, gender inequality, racial inequality, political differences, violence, nationalism, these things, you could go back 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And we talked about, just as an example, the history, the present day politics of the Middle East. I don't think they would sound very different than the politics of the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Not too many differences, no? It seems like we haven't perhaps perhaps not really come a long way. Women, clearly ups and downs, clearly ups and downs. Races, racial equality, clearly ups and downs. And for a man that likes to, or for a species, a race, human race that likes to pride itself on its own narcissistic belief that it is wise and supreme among animals, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. Plenty of evidence to the contrary. Difficult to disagree that we are above the animal planet or the animal kingdom. Maybe more technologically savvy, perhaps. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a gift, although right now I like to take advantage of it. But I would like to point out that despite the efforts of thousands of years and the ebbs and flows of getting it and then losing it, coming together, wars and then peace, the temporary peace that follows, the cycles continue. And you would like to think that there is some evolution in these cycles. But I think many people, whether you agree or disagree, many people would disagree that there's only cycles coming and going with regard to love, compassion, peace. In many ways, we're more at a precipice than ever before in terms of our capacity to harm ourselves and to harm others, harm our world. And I think it's not difficult to think that perhaps there's been no evolution at all. No evolution whatsoever. Although individually you can make a claim otherwise, I think universally is difficult to see. And perhaps there's another way of looking at things besides the same old ways that we just have to try to understand each other more, we have to try to listen to each other more. At least do no harm, His Holiness says. But these strategies, they're tried and they worked and then they fall apart. And we find ourselves repeating them again and again. It seems often like we're just barely hanging on, barely hanging on. So I would like to offer you a radically different approach to these supposedly huge universe, and it will require you to think it through, and then we'll meditate on it. But I'd like to propose a totally different way, the way of a type of Dharma practice, which is, Dharma here means reality, a type of reality practice known as Tantra, I'd like to propose this in a way that I think is simple and understandable, and I think will grab your attention. But I will require you to have pen and paper. So if you wouldn't mind having pen and paper, let's take a minute and let's go through this together. I think it will be a great benefit to you, your family, friends, community, your world, and how you see things, how you understand things. It's extraordinarily transformative what this tradition has to offer. This tradition is not so much a tradition of human beings, but a lineage of awareness, conscious awareness. And meaning, when I say conscious awareness, meaning not unconscious and reactive, but instead aware and responsive versus reactive. And the distinction being that reactivity has to do with recreating the same themes, the same cycles in one's own life, and you can see it in the world, in politics, how we treat each other, cycles of behavior. And it just seems like nothing has really changed within these cycles. So that's called reactivity. Just habit, repetition, and you know them well. If you've been around long enough, you're older than 35, we'll say. You can see it when you're younger too, but it's harder. Time helps here. But you can see the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year cycles in your life. Where you just keep repeating the same things, and you think you're growing, and then it's like, there it comes again. I see this many times in therapy. Many times when people say, "But I already knew that," and then again. And they're like, "God, do I really have to think this through again? Do I really have to talk about this again?" And that type of therapy session is exactly, you could say the same thing out of the newspaper. It's like, here we are again. When did the last time did this country see race riots? How many decades ago was that? And then you realize it wasn't decades ago, was it? Ferguson, Missouri wasn't 2 decades ago. Rodney King wasn't like that. 1968. The Compton riot. It doesn't stop. Throughout the South, and now 30 U.S. cities last night are ablaze. And do you really think it's going to stop? Always looking at failed leadership, always pointing the finger at someone else. So no matter who you blame on that side of the aisle or that side of the aisle, that's been going on a long time, hasn't it? That's a cycle, isn't it? Blaming other people, blaming politicians for being selfish. How many of you haven't had enough of that, blaming politicians? So you have to sort of see, it's the pattern, it's just pattern repeat over and over. So this is the first thing I would like you to see, and then there's the reactivity to the pattern. And it can easily be misled, and you can think it's the people that we're reacting to. These people, these white people, these black people, these police. But if the pattern is the same over and over again, perhaps there's something deeper taking place. That the people are part of the pattern. How about that? And so this requires, instead of a reaction to the people, which misses the pattern, this requires conscious awareness. Conscious awareness here means see the pattern. Because you can't change what you don't see. And if you keep trying to change, you're not going to make any progress. And the last few thousand years has shown you this. So at some point, you realize, Einstein's definition of insanity, right? in your own life first, I mean, what is that definition of insanity? You all know this, you all remember, right? Repeating the same thing, what? Over and over again, expecting a different result, And so in your own life, do you have unconscious behaviors that run in cycles, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year cycles? Can you see them? Please, let's see if you can do this. And I know you can. All right, go ahead and just write down what some of those cycles are with regard to finance, with regard to intimacy, feeling connected and then disconnected. Do you know yourself? Can you see the cycles? Because if you don't, then within the cycles, then you'll always think it's that husband or that wife or that kid or that neighbor, and you won't see anything. You'll just keep repeating the same cycles, and you'll say that you have free will. I understand that. But unconscious reactivity says otherwise. It says that you're reacting from a place that you're not aware of. You can't change what you don't see. And if you can't even see the cycles in your life, then you can't see, world cycles. And this is why, regardless of the fault of history, what's called history, and it is his story, for crying out loud anyway, right? I mean, it is essentially a white man's victor's history, military history. Almost across the world. And that type of history disenfranchises everyone else. There is a woman's point of view in terms of history. And many different types of women. There's different races and ages and religions, and there's so many different ways to look back. And if you want to study, you can study these things, the different cultural histories, for sure, no question. Different versions of migrant workers' history of America, black person's history of America, Hispanic, a gay person's history of America, and there's many different histories. But whatever it is that you study, the point of it here in this context right now is not to say that that's right or wrong, but to learn the history so that you don't repeat the mistakes, repeat the mistakes of the past, or at least you are able to see the cycles. Otherwise, you're just doing ridiculous things, which is like memorizing dates, like the dates of your own life. If this is what happened, I was born here, and then this happened to me. That's factual knowledge. It's not truth. It's not the truth. Factual knowledge and the truth are not the same things. Not the same things. Factual knowledge is like, I live at 4310 61st Street in Palmetto, Florida. That's a fact. That's factual knowledge. If you look me up, you find out, oh, he lives in a meditation center there. But the truth is, if you try to find anyone, really try to find a person named Michael, you couldn't find them. I mean, it's just a name that's given. Sometimes in California, sometimes in Colorado. Those are facts, but the truth is I don't live in any of those places. It's just a name, very, very temporary name given to this bunch of stuff. That's all. But I can say, I can fool myself and I can say, oh, this happened to me when I was younger. This is my personal history, my personal identity. And I can talk. Or I can talk about truth. Which is that this mind keeps experiencing, no matter what state, what country, keeps experiencing the same events cyclically, again and again. And that is what we mean, and then reacting to those cycles of behavior. And if I just keep saying, well, I was here and I was with this, this was my girlfriend, this was my wife, this was my ex-wife, if I just keep on going around like this, you see, I'm just talking about a bunch of facts, like, what city was burned last night? What other city had a protest last night? And if you just keep on talking about facts, you never get to the truth. And to get to the truth, you have to see the cycles, and you can't change again. You can't change what you don't see. And that's the benefit of studying history. Even if it's not a history that you have to agree with the facts, but history does point to the cycles of behavior. So in the white man's version of history, you can see the cycles of behavior are essentially conflict is important to them, right? Seems to be primary. That's a truth. That's a truth. You know, if you were to hear it from that perspective, from the white military point of view, that 1492 was a big year, you know, 1945 was a big year. But that's to miss the point of the pattern of behavior, which is victimization, overcoming victimization, and then claiming victory through power. Now that is a pattern, and that is cyclical. And they try it again and again. It's almost like you could say it's become their identity to proclaim victimization, and then to beat that victimization down through violence, and then to win, claim victory, and then, but the pattern you can see always needs someone to overcome. And that's a difference in a pattern, that's called the difference in pattern awareness. And you can see that, for example, like in your own life, as well as in America. The country has basically been at war since, I mean, every year since its inception. I think with maybe like 16 or 17 years off without any wars going on. So you can see the pattern. And if you just look at the facts, you'll just say that, oh, we beat these people, we were attacked by these people, and then we overcame them. We were attacked by these people, we overcame them. And you see the pattern. It's just like, wow. I mean, it's like always looking for someone, you know, to blame and then beat up and then claim victory. Now, many of you will recognize that same pattern in your own life. That same pattern. Think it through. You know, here it is, I was mistreated, you know, and always the other person was, you know, some sort of bipolar misfit, you know, a narcissist, a sociopath, always the other person, you know, and never once like looking back at the patterns of behavior and going, how do I find myself in these same situations over and over again? How am I such a sane person who's always with a sociopathic, narcissist, bipolar, schizophrenic? I mean, and if you look at the factual history and you believe your own history, and I do mean story, like fiction, then it looks like you've had an eventful life, I guess, you know, that you somehow made it despite the overwhelming psychotics that you've been involved with in relationship. You've made it, you're victorious, you know, sort of, you made it through, you know. But what about the pattern that you keep choosing, you know, according to you, misfits, psychological misfits? Isn't that of any interest to you? Or do you just like telling your friends that you like, wow, man, all of my relationships are just, I was with wackos. You know, I was with crazy people, you know. And by the way, I'm sane. You know? I mean, at some point you're like, I would hope as a practitioner, that you have some interest in the patterns, And because you won't change what you don't see, meaning you'll just keep meeting the same things over and over and reacting unconsciously to the patterns of your own doing. So you take a look at last night in America. It's burning. And you know, you could make the same claims that you always have, which are, how is this helpful? How is this honoring George's memory by doing this? You know, but that's the same thing you said in every riot. In Ferguson, that's the same exact thing that you said in Rodney King. That's the same thing you say every time. Don't you see the pattern? How can they be so stupid to burn down their own neighborhoods? And then you could say, well, it's the trolls online. And what, I mean, it's always someone else, you know? It's always someone else's fault. Always someone else, you know? And of course you're learning so much through the same cycles of behavior and reactivity over and over again. Why? Why not see the larger pattern? And let's take a look at it, you know? Let's take a look at it. Why not? You know, otherwise you're condemned to repeat the past. Your future is nothing other than a condemnation of not recognizing the past cycles. I mean, it's like going back to ancient Israel and talking about the fights between the Romans and the Jews, and then the Jews and the Christians, and the Jews and the Muslims, and it's almost like, I mean, is that really history? Or is there a pattern in there? Is there a pattern in there? I think there's some patterns we may want to recognize. So you're looking at inner patterns and then what you perceive to be outer patterns. And then I think if you do it that way, inner patterns and outer patterns, you'll start to see that the outer patterns mirror the inner patterns. The outer patterns mirror the inner patterns. It's a little bit, for example, like when some of my, very privileged white friends, like, wow, like I can't believe that they're burning down their own town. It's like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't honor, and they seemingly do not understand the last 400 years of history of America. And what it's like they cannot, seemingly unable, to put themselves in a position, right? This is the outer pattern of being empathetic, of like, what did you think was going to happen if you keep treating people like this? Do you really think this is about one person dying a horrific death? Because it's not. Now that's the outer pattern of being disassociative and unempathetic. But look at the internal pattern of being closed off from yourself and like literally turning away whenever there's pain. And I want to show you how the inner pattern is literally manifesting as the outer pattern. That's what I want to point to. Aren't you, in fact, disassociative? Don't you turn away from suffering? You don't bear witness to your own pain, do you? Do you? I admit it. If I asked you to sit still for half an hour and just feel emotions and sensations and don't do anything about it, just stay with it. Don't try to go do drugs, don't go try to drink, don't go be restless and go run away from everything. What if I just said, why don't you just sit with it? Sit with your suffering. See, if you did that, that would be a change in the unconscious pattern. And that's a prime time example of being able to just bear witness to your own suffering. Now, if you did that, what do you think would happen to your relationship to the outer world if you stop turning away from yourself? And just like what you do with yourself, when you feel suffering and you feel pain and you don't sit with it, you have tendency to blame your husband, your children, your wife, your dog, your cat. And look at the outer world. It's a reflection of what you do with yourself. There's no one who takes responsibility, who can bear witness to their own pain, who doesn't quickly come to the conclusion that suffering is an innate part of existence. And it's of no use to run away from it. It's of no use to run away from it. If I'm going to learn anything, because that's a double suffering. It doesn't get rid of the suffering, but the running away is another type of suffering. It's a running away from existence. And the funny thing is, if you just sat with your suffering and listened to it deeply and paid attention, the suffering would start to be transformed simply by paying attention, by giving an ear to the pain and the felt sense of anguish. And stop the blame game in your marriages. Stop the blame game in politics. And admit that you're suffering. And just hold it in attention and literally don't try to solve it. It's a break in the unconscious reactivity. When is the last time you've just held suffering? Your own pain, your own discomfort about getting older, about your finances, about about your job, In Kentucky, 40% unemployment right now. 40% unemployment. Tell me that there's not suffering. That's so bad and it's so distant, you know, it's so far away from me. But all you have to do is just bring up something like that and then ask yourself, have I ever felt the pain of being unemployed, of not knowing how I'm going to pay my bills, how I'm going to feed my children? And malnourishment, unfortunately, right now is becoming a huge factor again in the United States of America. Income, serious issue, but it all has to do with you. When you have had money, what do you do with it? Do you turn away from helping others? When you've had extra resources, do you hold on tightly? Or do you feel the pain of others who don't have as much as you? Do you allow yourself that, to sit with your own suffering? Otherwise, when you hear about places like Kentucky with literally 40% unemployment, it's easy to just go, wow, that sucks for people in Kentucky. And there's literally no connection. No connection. Have you ever sat with your own ostracization, just like what it's like to feel like not a part of a clique, for example, in school? What it feels like to be disenfranchised. Just to sit there with it and not try to fix it, not try to blame anyone. What it's like to be a woman in America. I mean, literally in Pakistan, Bangladesh have had female presidents. We've never even had a vice president who's a woman. And you can say, well, it's because of this or because of that, but let's just get down to it. I mean, they're second-class citizens in the United States. And still told your place is at home. What is a young woman supposed to think growing up in this country? And then you sit with that. That's the outer pattern. Look at the inner pattern, women, what it feels like. What does it feel like to be disenfranchised because of your ethnicity? You have to be able to. Otherwise, if you can't have that empathetic relationship, you can't change anything. You'll always be looking at the facts. This is what happened by this police officer on this date, on that street. And then you want to prosecute that person. And you'll be going after the wrong thing, I'm telling you. You're just doing what's been done for the last few thousand years. And you're missing the point. Missing the point altogether. It's nothing, that's part of the symptom. It's like looking at the person who's the commander-in-chief. He's not the problem, he's the symptom. He's the symptom of the problem. And the problem is internal for each of us. You're looking at your own narcissism, silly. Your own sense of self-importance. You really ought to take a look at these things. The outer pattern is nothing other than the manifestation of the inner world, the inner unconscious world. Forget the facts, look at the pattern. Identify the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year cycles in your inner world. And you will see how they manifest as the outer world in your life. And all of us see things differently. It's the same appearance of an outer reality, but very different responses. Very different responses to that. So, how do you get out of this seeming gender trap, racial trap, financial inequality trap? I mean, well, how can we put a stop? If we really wanted to try something radically different, because look at it. Your way, our way isn't working. Admit it. It's just this same historical cycles over and over. And what are you going to do? Double down? Try harder? And I'm not saying that you can't make things a little bit better. You can make women's rights a little bit better. You can have civil rights laws. You can try, and I think that it's worth it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's worth trying a little bit, but don't think that that's going to ever be the cure. Where there are people, they are selfish. They are selfish. They are self-centered, and they look out for their own families, their own tribes, their own interests, their own genders, their own race, their own neighborhoods. And I think it's just a call to just take a minute and just to accept that and stop saying that's wrong. Isn't it true? Isn't it true? Just yes or no. I mean, that there is, I mean, it's just like never-ending racism, nationalism, patriarchy. And it's just painful. And that's all, it's just a simple statement right now, just to be like, to sit with it and don't blame anyone for the first time, perhaps. Or we got to solve this. Don't go in this problem-solving mode. That's called tyrannical compassion. Just stop for a minute. Just stop. And I just want you to just like feel the pain. And in this country, the United States, to feel its pain and don't try to solve it for a minute. And allow yourself to weep. For the abject suffering that is the United States of America. In the same way that I would say to allow yourself to weep. For your own grief. Your own life. It's been hard. And those two things are reflections of each other. It is perfectly acceptable to just accept suffering. In our tradition, it's literally the first truth. And I know many people who are supposedly on this path, and they don't even accept the very first step. At least not fully. They don't really accept that existence is literally, it's sort of intrinsic pain of just being born and being shuffled around in terms of your identity, like to go to school and to learn about your body as it grows and to feel like you're part of something, and being educated in many ways is like, being institutionalized. Something feels off, but you go through it, and you're taught the really weird kind of sports that are, not really much different than Roman Colosseum days. Let's just be fair. In the United States, one of the biggest sports is like literally mauling each other. It may be the most popular sport. Mauling, literally. You know it. That's symptomatic that people have that kind of interest. What is it symptomatic of? This desire to just tear each other apart as a sport that people pay money for. Look in your own life. What's it a symptom of? And when you force someone to grow up like this, and it literally is sort of institutionalization, and then it's all about the money, it's all about the materialism, about being this dog-eat-dog, and you're just told this sort of, tall tales about capitalism and the economy, and just hook, line, and sinker. And then you're supposed to get married and supposed to have some kids and and trade cars every few years, save some money, and then stay together, and then get some retirement, and then for your future medical bills and some trips. That is such a unbelievable weakness. That's not a dream. You can call it the American dream, but it's not. It's foreign to your nature as a human being. It's not your potential as a human being. to be a homeowner who makes mortgage payments? It has nothing to do with you, actually. It's just a training. And I understand why people want to tear each other apart. It makes perfect sense to me. They want to tear themselves apart for who they've become. And because they don't do it to themselves, they project onto others. All these people are always trying to take from you, you know. If you listen to some people, they will tell you that it's the problem with the country is all these takers. These people are trying to get this, they want an education, they want health, they want everything free. But in reality, if you take a look at the financial pie, there's virtually no part of the pie where that is true. In terms of how our country's money is spent, there's hardly anybody getting any handouts on a percentage basis. The biggest handout, you know where it goes. It goes toward killing. And you all know it. There's plenty. More than enough. But in the way that it is in your life, it's never enough. And that gets manifest out there. You hold all of this in attention and just grieve. And just allow yourself to go, just to feel the mass of deception that you've put yourself through. That you did in fact buy into it. And you're still buying into it. And to even accept that I don't even know a way out of it. I just have to keep on keeping on, I guess. You know, people talk about herd immunity. That's not the right term. It's herd mentality. You just keep on keeping on, and you can't even, despite your claims of being human, you can't even imagine another way. We just, like, no matter how many people get sick, you just got to go back to work. Old people just need to die. Even though you are literally riding on their coattails. You were riding on the coattails of the greatest generation. And now they're just like some people you can just shuck off, isn't it? You're in pain, my friend. You're in pain. We're all in pain. And our country is in pain. And you might want to just take a minute and just accept suffering. Not try to fix it, not try to figure it out. Because if you can't sit with the suffering, you're never going to you're going to react to what you say is the cause of the suffering. And you're always going to get it wrong if you do that. And our history is filled with getting it wrong. That's why we keep coming back to the same cycles over and over. You get the same cycles over and over because we keep doing it wrong. And the cycles will keep presenting themselves to us until we get it right. It won't stop. This won't be the last George. This will not be the last city that's burned. It's never going to stop. The women are so good. It's going to keep presenting itself. These patterns will keep presenting themselves. That's why they're called patterns. They're cyclical. Cycles of behavior. And they only stop when you bring attention to them. That's it. Just like in your own life. The only way a cycle of behavior stops is if you bring attention to it. And you won't know how to solve the outer world by bringing attention to it until you start to look at your inner world and bring attention to it. They're not two separate worlds. One is completely, 100% indicative of the other. Period. All right. So, once you address the root, which is suffering, that where there is existence, there is pain. There's pain. And you can accept that. And don't even try, realistically, don't even try anything else until you can bear witness to your own pain. Don't try to help anyone else just yet until you can bear witness to their pain. Don't try to change your country, and get these police, go after these police and go after this race and go after some so-called media. I mean, there's no one. Just accept pain. Stop blaming Fox. Stop blaming MSNBC, and just sit with the pain of it all. If you don't do that, you're part of the problem. Blaming others is part, and blaming organizations and groups, that's part of the problem. It's not the solution. If you could blame a group and then get a solution, then what happened? What happened? Is there not enough blame? Was that the problem? Not enough blame in your personal life? You're angry. You're angry. You have anxiety. You're sad. You feel ashamed. You feel guilty. You feel jealous. And worse, you think you are right. And you sit with that. And don't try to get out of it. Admit it. Are you angry? Are you angry? Are you frustrated in your life, in your personal life? Yes or no? Score it out, 0 to 10 this past week. Are you angry? 0 to 10. 10's the highest, 0 not existent. Are you angry? Yes or no? 0 to 10. Write it down. I'll show you something. Are you angry in your personal life? You don't even maybe even know why. Just frustrated, irritated, annoyed, perturbed. Just generally bitchy. It's not just a resting bitch face. It's literally your resting state. It's like your outer expression is not an act. You angry at the world? You angry at politics? State of affairs of the country? You mad? So one's your inner anger score, one's your outer anger score. I mean, is it possible to have a 0 for the inner score and a 10 on the outer score? Really, is it possible? Let's check it out. In your personal life, anxiety score, worrying about the future. Worrying about the future in your personal life. Your inner anxiety score. And then you have anxiety about the world, about the country, state of affairs. Write them down, 0 to 10, please. I want to show you something here. Depressed, feelings of hopelessness, about your inner world, your inner life. And then depressed about the state of the affairs of the world, your country. Guilt. How you feel internally. Your sense of worthlessness, your sense of value, personal worth. And then guilt about how you relate to the world. I mean, like, you hear about, I don't know, I mean, you're part of the United States of America. You hear about Yemen, some foreign country, where people are starving en masse. And you know very well that American companies on the west coast of the United States make the bombs that do all of this. You know very well. Do you even say anything? And it's like somewhere in the back, I mean, like, and I could, that's just one. I mean, I could give a million different examples of how the biggest piece of the pie is used to help destroy the world. Do you even say anything? Or do you just sort of like go around collecting money, go to your job, and like, those problems are too big to solve, you know? Do you have any guilt around any of this? Like, just, I don't even say a thing. I'm so anesthetized, I'm so removed, so not. Man, I just want to go to the beach. I just want to go surfing in Southern California. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. I mean, have you ever even written a letter saying I don't approve of this? I don't agree. Do you have any sense of like really personal hurt? Like you just have to kind of keep it at bay and just sort of like keep moving around and just keep changing this, keep changing the view, keep changing the angle so you don't have to pay attention to your involvement. Your own personal involvement in the suffering. Your own suffering first, guilt. And the suffering of the world. They're just totally disassociated. Because what would happen if you accepted, like, maybe I am involved, maybe things are interconnected? And what would you feel if you allowed yourself that possibility of interconnection? That you're part of what you see in this country, that you are part of the racism, that you, by not connecting with other people's pain, are part of the problem. Could be, but do you try to disassociate and say, no, I was trained differently, I was raised differently, But do you say anything? And does that come with any shame? Your silence. Does your silence come with shame? Do you stick up for your neighbors who aren't as privileged as you are because of your skin color? Do you say anything at all? Or do you feel like it's even pointless to say anything because I'll be attacked? Oh, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to stir up the pot. I don't want to defend the gay people, the Hispanic people, the black people, women. I don't want to. And what happens, do you think, when you don't? And then you see someone, perhaps in power who doesn't give a damn about women. And you wonder, how did they get there? How did they get there? You see someone doesn't give a damn about the country that they lead, and you wonder, how did they get there? Look at your own internal relationship if you want an answer to these questions. And stop saying, out there. Look this way. What do you do? Do you say anything, or have you anesthetized yourself? Or maybe you did something way back when, back in the 60s, and what happened to that person? But don't blame the world. Don't blame yourself even. Just sit with the pain first. Bear witness without trying to disassociate, without trying to entertain yourself with a movie or alcohol. And it hurts. All right. That's the tough part of today. That's the tough one. That's like, all right, we have a problem here. We're suffering. I'm suffering, and the world I see is suffering. And if you can't get your head around those two things, then go ahead and turn off. Go do what you got to do today. Go disassociate somewhere else, because you're not going to like the rest of this. Okay? I mean it. If you're already like, I don't have any pain, talking about, leave now. Bye-bye. This isn't for you. This is only for people who are connected to themselves and the world. Everyone else, take a hike. Thanks for joining us. All right. So, we have a few people remaining. This is for the rest of you. With this suffering, what to do with it, how to transform it so that the inner transformation is mirrored in the outer transformation. All right? So we can actually do something with our personal history and our outer history, our world history. We can actually do something versus just unconsciously react, which just does nothing other than to keep the patterns going in the same cycle. So 20 years ago, roughly, maybe more now, I was a young monk. And interfaith dialogue, an interfaith dialogue with some Catholic priests, a rabbi, a Hopi elder, and who else was there? Oh yeah, there was a Sufi sheikh. We tried to get an imam, but couldn't find. Oh, and there was a Hindu lady, yeah, Hindu priestess. And it went on for the weekend. And during the break, during one of the breaks, the two priests in Aspen approached me, and they said, I think one of them said, I like you, I have a for you, he said. And I said, okay, that's nice. I see you're very warm, and they were the hosts. And I said, well, thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting this. And they said, can we ask you something? And I said, sure. And this is where I would like to have you to have pen and paper. They said, you're wearing, these robes, these red ones, and that's a different kind of tradition than the other one. The yellow robes are usually Thailand. Sort of the orangish robes can be Thailand or Sri Lanka, So the red ones is like Himalayan region, Bhutan, Tibet, Nepal, and of course these traditions have spread elsewhere, all of them. But that's the one, and that's the what did they say? The Vajrayana. I said, yes, Mahayana, Vajrayana, great vehicle. We call it a great vehicle of Buddhism. And they said, we want to understand something. What is this thing? All of these weird beings, it's called Tantra, there's sort of like these weird looking, guys with 4 arms and the girl who's green, And if you're a Catholic priest and you're looking at this stuff, I mean, I can't even imagine anymore. At one point I could imagine how crazy it must have all looked. But I really have a great deal of empathy for this. In our tradition we have like little green girls, and we have blue guys. And, if you come from our tradition, we have, people with 12 arms, 6 arms. Crazy, all these different colors and these different, some of them have horse heads. Some of them literally look like monsters, and it must look insane. So they're asking me, these 2 Catholic priests, they said, can we ask you something? Because you seem like, you're kind of normal, and I said, no, come on, don't be offensive. You seem like a nice person, warm-hearted, and compassionate, and they're like, so how is this, sort of outcome that you appear to be have anything to do with these green people, with these blue people, with all, and I totally, it really kind of caught my attention, because it occurred to me that the thing that I had immersed myself in, the worldview, they was totally foreign to them. I mean, really out there. And they said, can you help us understand? And I said, well, I could explain it to you intellectually, but we're never going to get anywhere that way. That maybe give you 2-3%. But if we do the experience of it, that will teach you. That will train you. And I said, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to take you up. I would like to explain this to you, but I'd like to explain it to you experientially to these two priests. One of them was about almost like literally, he's like 7 feet tall. He had these huge like banana hands. You know, he went to shake my hand, and my whole entire arm, my forearm disappeared in his hand. He was a giant, you know. And so we go and sit down. We go and we sit down, and I said, do you happen to have a cross? Do you happen to have Jesus, you know, with you? And, you know, the big monk, he opens up his cloak, and there it was, this huge, I mean, like right there, underneath his cloak, he was wearing this huge cross. It must, I'm literally like this, you know, must be like, what, 9-inch big, thick wooden, with Jesus on it, you know, and it hanging from this, kind of threaded rope, and he takes. I'm like, of course it will, of course. So I would like all of you now to think of a being. You know, if you're Christian, Jesus will suffice. We're Mary. If you're Jewish, you can think of someone. Someone that you like admire, you know, if you're religious. And if you're Buddhist, you can, you know, you can be a living being, a deceased being. It doesn't matter. If there's someone that you look up to and they say, that is someone, I'm not like that person perhaps, but man, do I that. You know, if I could emulate anyone, you know, the highest qualities, I would emulate that. You know, if you're Hindu, you might think of, you know, if Vedantis might be like a Sadhguru, you know, Nisargadatta or Ma. You know, you could think of so many, you know, great Vivekananda, Yogananda. You know, if you're Sufi, I mean, God, the sky's the limit. No, so many to choose from. You know, the Rumis, the Hafizes, I mean, so many, you know, to choose from. I think of Dalai Lama, you know, or I think of my first teacher, Penna Rinpoche. I just beings I look at, they're just totally enlightened. I would like, no question, you know, no question. I can see them in my mind. Can you choose one? And if you're not spiritual or religious, that's fine. You just, anyone, you know, in world history, you know, Gandhi, you just will do. Someone, you look at them and their qualities are just so amazing. Desmond Tutu, you know, Mandela. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just someone you like, you just have just this idea that they're out there, you know, they were out there, or they are out there in the world, and they're doing great things. You know, they're really like, there's these few beings in the world who made, you know, an unbelievable difference. And you think of their qualities, and they're just amazing to you. You know, just by thinking of them, you know. As I think of my teacher, Dalai Lama, and, you know, my heart, you know, smiles. You know, he's just absolutely beautiful. But I know his whole life history, you know, his journey from, you know, from northern Tibet, and from Amdo as a, you know, this baby born in a you know, sort of farmer nomad camp, and he just, you know, now the, you know, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and changed the lives of millions and millions of beings. And for me, he changed me. He changed my entire way of being. And but again, they can also be deceased beings. It doesn't matter, male, female, regardless of race. Makes no difference. Can you think of one, please, and then write their name down? You think of them and they're just like the kindest, wisest, sometimes sharpest, you know, but compassionate, and please write down their qualities, you know, please write down. This is what I was doing with the two priests, you know, and of course they, you know, they both chose Jesus, and they wrote all these things: benevolent, transcendent. They transcended the world. Love, loving, patient, empathetic, magnanimous, generous, kind. Just the positive qualities you imagine that these, you know, you. And I don't know, maybe some of you have an image of one of these beings even nearby. You know, maybe you do. Maybe you can look around wherever you are. And if you have an image, maybe you can just bring it, you know, bring it in front of you. A physical representation. So you've written down all of these qualities, right? And that's, you know, what this image symbolizes for you. This person symbolizes these qualities. So the outer image, and this is really important, the outer image is just an outer image. You know, the outer image is just an outer image. And it's very, like, if other people saw it, maybe it doesn't mean that to them. You know, maybe they have a different idea, different concept. You know, like these two priests that brought out Jesus on a cross. You know, I have plenty of friends in the Buddhist world, if they saw that, they would just be like, yeah, he's probably a good bodhisattva, you know, something like that. You know, but for Christians, it's not like that, you know. It's very personal. And so what does that symbolize? You know, if you're Christian, I mean, what does that mean to you as a Christian? I mean, that's a very, very deep and rich symbol of sacrifice and universal love and forgiveness. And so the outer symbol is one thing, but what it means is very different. You know, when I see an image of the Buddha, wow, I mean, my immediate reflex is to put my hands together. It's literally reflexive. To put my hands together at my throat and at my heart, and then bow down and touch my head to the ground. Not to the statue, you understand, but to what it means to me. Otherwise, this is just simple idol worship. So it's not idol worship, silly. You know, it's what this means to you. And the Buddha changed my life and changed the Dalai Lama's life. I mean, the Buddha is, for us, you know, he is the symbol of awakening, you know, of transcendence and love and kindness and compassion and ethics, limitless joy and patience and contentment. And it is so much, and I see the symbol, I see a Buddha, you know, I bow, I drop to my knees in deference. Not the image, but what it means, what it symbolizes. And something like that, something so heartwarming to you and so filled with emotion, that when you see it, that you're just taken. You're just taken. Yeah. So it's like that. It's like that. So I'm sitting here with the two priests, and we go through this just like I'm doing with you right now. So they said, what is Tantra? I said, it's about, Tantra is a continuum of awareness, but that's not really useful here. You know, it's about transformation. Sometimes you can even say alchemical transmutation. And they said, what does that mean? I said, we're doing it, don't worry. So first the image appears to be outside of you. Now, write this down, just as I asked them. I said, in comparison to that being, what about you? I said, I'd like you to make a comparison. So you see them as all loving, all knowing, in comparison to the list that you just wrote down, please write down you, about you. Now you already wrote down anger, right? And guilt and anxiety. So those are all there too, right? Oh, that's already there, right? And those probably aren't emotions that you would ascribe, right, to that being, right? Not angry and depressed and jealous and guilty, you know. I mean, Jesus probably wasn't up there on the cross with a lot of depression and guilt, right? Probably not, right? You don't, at least you don't have him like that in your mind, right? I don't see the Buddha with any of those qualities. I see myself sometimes, you know, with those qualities. You know, on a good day, not too much. On a usual day, too much. But what are you like? Do you have those qualities that you see in those great beings, or do you see other qualities? Yeah. And maybe you have some of those qualities, but not to the, what you say, the height, the degree, right? Not to the same. I mean, that, you know, Buddha, the Dalai Lama for me is the embodiment of loving kindness. I don't say that I'm devoid of loving kindness. Maybe on some bad days, maybe, you know, some bad moments, right? But I have a little bit, you know, we call it bodhicitta, you know, bodhicitta, you know, the awakened heart mind. And I have a little bit, but nothing like, I mean, Dalai Lama is like, wow, you know, for me. He's really, really something, you know. You know, if you're Catholic, I mean, Pope Francis, I mean, wow, what an amazing being, no? I mean, really something, you know. Transformative figure. Now, if you're old school Catholic, maybe not, you know, maybe he's like, you know, kind of like the devil or something. I don't know. You know, you're maybe hoping for a Pope Pius or something. But anyway, you have the idea, you know, you have the idea. And, I mean, look at you, look at what you're like compared to them. It's not the same, is it? You know? They're out there, and little old you is over here. You know, and little old you's having problems with the problems with yourself, and little old you's having problems with the world, you know. And I said, you know, just like this to these two priests. You know, I said, you're over here, and I'm like, Jesus, he's amazing, no? And they were like, yeah, you know, what, you know, beautiful, you know, the Son of God, for crying out loud, you know, I mean, you know, divinity here on earth, you know, walking among us, right? And that was important, that comment I just made. Divinity here on earth, walking among us. Do you see these beings like that? Almost like an expression of light. You know, I see the Dalai Lama like that, just an expression in the world and walking on this planet as just love and kindness and compassion. And despite the unbelievable turmoil that he was thrown into in his life, losing his country, 1 in 6 Tibetans, truly genocide, were killed, and he walks over the Himalayas and just keeps on going. And never has a bad word to say about, you know, Chinese, nothing. Yeah, no matter what they say, what they do. Just love, and just encourages Tibetans not to fight. I mean, it's just very strange, you know, just transcendent love, you know, for all beings, regardless of their race, their religion, and literally like walking divinity. I see like that, you know, I feel like that. And then I'm over here and I walk around on the planet and I'm like, what about this and what about that and those people and the look at the younger generation, and they're, oh my God, you know, they're prima donnas. I mean, every generation says that about the younger generation, by the way. You know, I never hear the Dalai Lama saying, you know, those Gen Zers, you know, they're never going to connect. They're never going to get it, you know. Very, you know, the compelling differences between His Holiness and myself. I mean, wow. You know, so different. You know, I mean, I'm like, you know, it's little bitty man, you know, an infant, you know, a spiritual infant in comparison. Right. And what about you compared to these beings? Real and imagined, you know. What about you? I mean, they're like walking, literally walking light from heaven, you know, right here on this planet. And what about in comparison? Distance between You and them. That's called, from our perspective, your spiritual journey. You're not a charlatan. You're not a fraud. You're not a fake. It's called your spiritual growth between how you see yourself and how you see them. That's amazing. You know, like, we're not saying you're a good person, a bad person, nothing like that. We're just saying this is how you see you, this is how you see them. And the distance between and that great being and the way you see yourself, that's your spiritual journey. That's kind of nice, no? So I'm sitting with the two priests, and they're like, yeah, I really, you know, I admire Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. I've lived my best. I've lived in a monastery. You know, they both said to me through most of their life, you know, they were living the life, and good Christians. I mean, and meditative. I mean, really, like, not just doctrinal Christians, but really meditating, and they had founded this thing called Christian Centering Prayer, and they made a huge impact, and still do. They both are gone now, you know, but made a huge impact in the Christian world. You know, amazing beings, and I love them very much. You know, great practitioners. You know, I really say better practitioners than most of my Buddhist friends, to be honest. You know, I mean, really dedicated and lived their life. You know, holy, like very little, if any, separation between their higher aspirations. Please write this part down. There are those beings. They looked at Jesus, and that for them. He was the peak. He is the, you know, sort of the highest. You know, the highest. Real, like, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, you know, in one being, you know, encompassing the Trinity, you know, and walking among us. And in trying to live that life, they became, by admiring that being, by wanting to emulate that being, they became beautiful themselves. They became beautiful themselves through the process, the thing that they saw in another, by emulating the qualities they saw in another. Great heights that they wished for, they aspired toward. Great heights. And so I said, let's do something. Let's stop talking now. And I said, I'd like you to look at Jesus on the cross. Let's put it about 3 feet in front of you. So if you have that image of that being, put it about 3 feet in front of you. And if you don't have the image, you know, of your sacred being, your holy being, then visualize it. Close your eyes, and about 3 feet in front of you, see them. This is what I did with the priests, which is very traditional Tantra, transformation, transmutation. And so they had this cross, and I said, no, concentrate, focus attention on the image. Focus attention on the image. And then close your eyes and see if the image is still in your mind. And then open your eyes and then close it. And then repeat like this a few times. Until the image becomes clear, like burnt into your mind, like burned resin into your mind. And you can see the holy being so sweetly. And it's like they're out there, and imagine that they're actually there, will you? Just imagine that they're actually there, and you can feel the warmth of their body. They're so close to you. You can maybe even feel their breath. Ask them to come. Ask them, like literally as a prayer, please come and sit with me. And imagine that they do. Please come and sit with me. And imagine that they do. Like they're right here with you now. If you're Christian, it's like having Jesus with you right now. If you're Buddhist, it's like having the Dalai Lama with you, like right now, right here in front of you. And you can feel them. And I would like you to imagine in your mind bowing down to that being. Bowing down to them. Supplicating yourself in humility. And not just to the being, but specifically to the qualities that they represent, because this isn't about an ego. It's not about a person, it's about qualities. All the qualities. And as you bow down, think of the qualities that you're bowing down to, that the being represents. They represent, you are bowing down to love, the embodiment of love and kindness and compassion and wisdom. Supplicate, just be humble. Admire them, admire their qualities is what that means. Bow down again, and then again. Even if it's just in your mind. You're bowing down to the greatness of these qualities with humility, of which we could all use a little bit more of. And now in front of them, I would like you to imagine that you admit some fault of yours. Admit some fault, please. Like they're there and they're in front of you. Admit some fault, something of the past week. Some anger, some jealousy. And that I would like you, with humility, imagine asking them, like I would ask to the Dalai Lama, would you please help me with this? Will you stay with me? Will you help me to see my negative qualities and help me to transform them? And imagine that they smile. Imagine that they smile and they say, okay, my son or my daughter, my child. Imagine. And then they say, don't you have any good qualities? And they ask you about something good that you've done this week also. Imagine that they talk back to you. Don't you have any good qualities? Think of some good thing that you've done this week, some good thought or good speech or good action that you've had. You've got one? And then they say to you, now my child, rejoice, rejoice. Smile at your own goodness, because it's also there. So please put a big grin on your face right now, a big smile, rejoice in your own good qualities, that's also there. You're not just, this small creature, you also have good qualities. And now I would like you to imagine that you ask them, will you keep teaching? Will you keep teaching? Don't stop teaching. And ask also to see teachings everywhere you go. Places that you least expect, perhaps in the weather, in a sunrise, a sunset, the wind, the earth itself, the oceans. Ask them to show up in many different forms, perhaps as a homeless person, perhaps as someone who's angry in your life, who's difficult. That. To remind you that sometimes teachings come in places that you least expect. Sometimes in the violence, to remind you of peace and its value. and in the fear to remind you to always be kind and compassionate. Teachings come in different traditions, wearing different clothes. Respect. Now ask them not just to keep teaching you, but ask them to stay with you. Imagine putting your hands together, please. Imagine asking them to stay with you, to come inside of you, to come into your heart, and to walk with you in this life. Say their name. Come into me, come into my heart. Walk with me. Always be present. And imagine that they agree, they smile. And imagine that you see them, open your eyes and you can see them with your eyes. Eye of vision, not with your physical eye. Maybe eyes half open. And imagine that they rise up. They rise up. And they become smaller and smaller and smaller. And they come over the top of your head. And they turn around. And they're facing the same direction as you. And they become smaller and smaller, and they begin to descend down to the top of your head like a little bounce. And imagine that they're sitting there on the top of your head right now. This great being with these great qualities. And ask them to come inside of you, to come into your heart. And imagine that there's like a little tube, like a little chute, and you can feel it. Close your eyes and you can feel them. And they come down this little chute just in front of your spine. And they come in to your heart. Imagine that there's a space. Make a space in the center of your chest. Make it inviting. Like a soft cushion. Maybe it looks like a moon disc that's sitting on flower petals. There's a nice backrest that looks like the sun, like radiant. And then make the room filled with music that they would enjoy, your favorite smells, fragrances. Fill it with the right type of light. Maybe soft light or candlelight, butter lamps. The right type of music, maybe some chanting. Om Venza Guru Pema Siddhi Om Venza Guru Pema Siddhi and wonderful food. Enjoy, perhaps a sky filled with flowers. And then imagine that they come down the chute and they find a place in your heart. They're happy and contented. And all the qualities that you imagined in that being that was outside of you, they're now inside of you. They're inside of your heart. Now imagine that this being bursts into light. Their essence bursts into light. through the cells of your body, the neurons, your throat, like enlightened body, like you're gaining this enlightened body, this enlightened speech, and then your mind is filled like this. And all this represents the qualities, the benevolence, the infinite compassion of that being. And so intertwined that you feel as though you are inseparable with him. Like communion, like a true communion. Until there is no difference between you and them. That you are the embodiment of the qualities that you imagined in another. That you are joined now in the highest form of yoga. A true interconnectedness. That what you have imagined in another is no different than what you are now. Now open your eyes completely and imagine that you have become that you are that. And look at the world now, how different the world looks to you. And look down on how you appear to yourself. That you are here in this world with a true path and purpose to walk as divinity, to walk as light and compassion, the embodiment of love in this world. That is not someone else's job. That is now your work. That you are not separate, and you never were separate from the beings that you imagined. And then you put your hands together after the cultivation of loving kindness and compassion embodied. You do the practice, and then the last part is we call dedicating, the dedication. I'd like you to think of some beings that you know in your life, starting with yourself, who are suffering. They have anger and shame and guilt, anxiety and sadness. Now say to yourself, just speaking to that little part of you that still may be still there, that the divinity didn't creep all the way into, that little part of you that just might still be there, perhaps. Say that being's name, which is your own. Michael. May you be truly happy. Michael, say your name. May you be well. May you be safe. Say your name. May you be peaceful and at ease. Now look out at the world. Think of someone you know in your personal life who's suffering. Financially, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. Just one person. And you are now the embodiment of loving kindness and compassion. Imagine from that space in your heart, that love bursts toward them. Say their name. May you be happy. Now inhale and imagine taking on their suffering as a great being, which you are, a great being. Imagine inhaling like black smoke. You were willing to take on their pain. Now exhale loving kindness and compassion back to them. May you be well. Say, may you be well. Inhale again. Take away more of their pain. May you be safe. May you experience safety. Inhale. You can take away their pain, their suffering. Imagine. And then exhale, clear light of loving kindness. May you be peaceful. mind that the person that you knew who was suffering, they have felt your love, your benevolence, your kindness. And imagine that they have a slight smile on their face. That just by thinking of them, and by just a willingness to take on their suffering, and to be present with their pain, to even take it on if you could, that if you could, you would. You are the embodiment of divinity now, and you would be willing to do this. If you could, you would. And you would send them all of your love and all of your kindness, and you wouldn't hold back anything. And you wish for them, say their name. May you attain enlightenment in this very life. May you be free of suffering. May you experience internal and external peace. May you always be at ease. And now expand that circle to include your friends, close friends, all of your family. Breathing in their pain, a willingness as a great being, which you are, a willingness to breathe in their suffering and their pain. And exhaling loving kindness, compassion, well-being, and safety to them. And may they too become enlightened in this very life. May they attain the greatest perfection, the greatest completion that is possible. May they attain the recognition of interconnectedness, the unity of being, wholeness, complete. May they regain their wholeness from the wholeness that was lost. And may you play an integral part in their journey. Now expand your circle ever wider to beings that you don't know so well, more neutral beings, perhaps that you don't even know their names, regardless, and all over the world, different countries and races and religions and genders, sexual orientations, no matter what. May they also experience well-being and happiness. May they experience love, wisdom, and peace, just like you. And now, people of difficulty, you don't understand. Think of them. And as a great being, you don't care about these things, these trivial things. You just put it all aside and wish them well. And you know that it's up to you. Not up to them and their behavior. It's up to you. You take it all on as a personal responsibility. Breathe in, imagine that you could take away their suffering. That if you could, you would. As a great being, you do not differentiate between your children, those who are kind and those who are difficult. You love them all equally. Think of those great, beautiful, difficult beings in your life. Think of them. And now imagine breathing in their pain. That if you could, you would take it all from them. And now send them loving kindness, happiness, and well-being. You take it personally. That it's up to you. You want to be involved. And now not just human beings, but every type of being. All the fish in the ocean, the birds in the sky, the insects, the animals. Every living being. Just put your hands together. May every living being experience happiness, true happiness. The highest happiness of enlightenment, of awakening. May every living being be well. May they experience physical and mental, spiritual well-being. May every living being feel safe. That they can go for a run. They can go for a walk outside. That they can breathe. That they feel safe, regardless of their gender. That they can go for a run. That they can breathe. May every living being feel safe. May every living being be peaceful. Live without fear of being attacked. Despised. Removed and alienated. May every living being feel connected. May every living being feel contented, fulfilled and complete. May every living being, just like myself, be at ease. And by this merit, may every living being be happy, may they be well, may they be safe, peaceful and at ease. May I free every living being from suffering. May I be the doctor, the nurse, the medicine itself. May I be a bridge for those who wish to walk over. May I be a lamp for those who need light. May I be a bed for those who need rest. May every living being be free of suffering. And for as long as space remains and sentient beings remain, may I too remain to alleviate the suffering of this world. Om Mani Padme. Okay, so thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.